hard to swallow because the talent is there, the coaching is there, and the team has worked really hard for this. You can go back 2 years ago. I still contend that the 2017 Bulldogs were the best team in the country. I still believe that. It was unfortunate that they didn't beat Alabama in the national championship game. We all know what happened. No need to rehash it. What I think is really curious is when you look back on that, Alabama essentially got a bye by not having to play in the SEC title game. I think Georgia had a lot tougher draw. Then last year, I think there was a strong case to be made for Georgia to make the playoff, unless you thought that Oklahoma falling behind 28-0 in 17 minutes against Alabama was a statement. I didn't. But the fact of the matter is Georgia's been knocking on the door, and this is the year they have to knock the door down. And what do they need to do that? Well, replacing wide receivers is one thing. We'll talk about that. And obviously beefing up a defensive line that's been somewhat underwhelming, I guess is the best way to put it, is another thing. But it all starts for me with Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm is the trigger, okay? You can't win without a trigger. And Jake Fromm is a guy that Georgia has all the eggs in the basket in. If they didn't, Justin Fields would still be around, right? Kirby Smart had to make a decision last year, and it was Jake Fromm all year long. Now, Fields had his opportunities, but make no mistake about it. It was always Jake's job. No one was going to take that job from Jake, the way Jake was performing and winning football games. And now that it's finally Jake's team, he's got to assert himself in a different way that I don't think he was able to with Jacob Eason on a roster, that I don't think he was able to when there was the public perception that Justin Fields was still competing for the job and could ultimately be the quarterback of the future. I don't think Kirby meant to, but I think that undermines a quarterback a little bit when you got a number two that's that good. I don't want to say it divided the locker room, but I think there were questions in the locker room because let's face it, Justin Fields was a talented guy. Fields is out of the picture now, and it's all about Jake. And it came up again this week. Sports Illustrated did an article where they talked to some of Jake's teammates. They talked to Kirby about it. They talked to Jake. And it's kind of here and it's gone. But what it's done is it's kind of all made us take a look at, wow, this is Jake Fromm's team. And is this Jake Fromm's last year? That's the other question you got to ask yourself. Jake's a junior. He'd have another year of eligibility remaining if he wants it. But, again, we look at those early draft projections, and they can change because right now, Kirby said it best, the NFL guys aren't throwing their opinions on paper. They don't share it. They keep it very private. It's worth millions of dollars. But the outside analysts are looking in saying, when you look at this quarterback class, maybe Jake Fromm. Maybe Jake Fromm's in that top 15. Maybe Jake Fromm's in that top 10 overall picks. Wait another year, Trevor Lawrence is in the class, right? So that's part of it too, the sense of urgency that Jake brings to the table. And I think he brings a lot. And we've heard Kirby talk about that, how assertive Jake has been in the huddles, right, with the offensive linemen, holding teammates accountable. Well, right now, based on what we saw last Saturday, and I know everyone has seen that catch that George Pickens has made. Right now, the most important thing that Jake Fromm can do is lasso George Pickens into being all in. When I say all in, I mean all in, like knowing the playbook, like staying after every practice, like recognizing that there's a window for George Pickens too. Because guess what? I don't see the next Jake Fromm on the roster right now. Now, Stetson Bennett was lights out, unbelievable in that scrimmage. Kirby couldn't stop talking about him. And I was impressed with Stetson Bennett in the G-Day scrimmage as well. He played on both teams. I thought he played well on both teams. But the window for Georgia, right, this year with Jake, with the offensive line, the Great Wall, a lot of those guys are going pro. Underclassman, Andrew Thomas, going to be gone. Solomon McKinley, probably going to be gone. Ben Cleveland, probably going to be gone, right? It's an opportunity. DeAndre Swift, probably going to be gone. Big opportunity for Georgia to cash in. It starts with Jake Fromm. Now, let's dial it back to Saturday. So what do we take out of Kirby Smart not saying his name? What do we take out of a first-team offensive performance that wasn't as impressive as the head coach wanted? Well, it's a red flag, and Kirby's raising it, and Kirby's waving it. He wants everybody to know, okay? He's going to be transparent with the fans, and he wants his team to feel that pressure as well. They need to understand there's an expectation, there's a standard, you got to meet it. Kirby Smart knows what a championship team looks like. He was on those Alabama staffs. And again, I think Georgia has had a team capable of competing for, if not winning, the national championship the last 2 years. So Kirby knows what it's supposed to look like. It's not there yet. And this is Kirby's way of letting these guys know. And now it's up to Jake Fromm to take that next step. The head coach has spoken. Kirby's put it out there. Now it's up to Jake to speak. Now it's up to Jake to lead in the locker room. Now it's up to Jake to be assertive, to bring these guys together, to use his charisma and his leadership to rally these young receivers and get these guys on the same page and understand, look, what we did this summer in 7-on-7 was great, but we're not on the driving range anymore, okay? There's a defense on the other side of the ball. Now, they were put to the test by the Georgia defense. I talked to Charlie Warner about that yesterday. I said, hey, man, I'm guessing Kirby didn't do the wooden Indian drill out there. I'm guessing those guys were moving around. He said, yeah, they threw something at us. He said, but still should have gotten it done. That's what you want to hear Charlie say. I wrote a story about what Charlie Warner said when he was asked what he thought the problem was with the first-team offense. And I think some people took it wrong. I think some people misinterpreted where Charlie was coming from. Charlie Warner doesn't need to make any excuses. He's a senior. He's one of the most well-respected guys in the clubhouse. So when he said, quote, I think we let the heat get to us a little bit, we should be used to it, we're going to have to pick it up, I think he was being honest. He also talked about mental toughness. It's all mental. You've got to beat your mind. You can't succumb to the heat, Charlie said. You got the helmet on. You've got another 15 pounds on you. That's hot. You've just got to fight through it and bring the younger guys along with you, right? Bring the younger guys along with you. That said a lot to me. Charlie said a lot with those words. He wasn't making excuses. He was telling the truth. He said, we got to get mentally tougher. He was challenging his teammates. I don't think Charlie Warner's got to get mentally tougher. I think Charlie Warner's a tough guy. Remember that broken leg? Yeah, I think Charlie's a tough guy. And don't forget, he's best friends with Jake Fromm. I think these guys are of the same ilk. And I think what we heard from Charlie Warner yesterday talking about bring the younger guys along with you is leadership. And so yesterday they had a knockout practice. You know, Kirby said Saturday afternoon it was going to be very important how the team responded. They had over 100-degree heat index yesterday in Athens. I think it's hot everywhere. All the Georgia fans all over the state are hot. These guys are practicing in pads. Now, if Kirby wanted to, he could practice in the morning. If Kirby wanted to, he could practice under the lights at night and knock 10 or 15 degrees off it. He wants them in the heat. He wants the adversity. He wants to build the toughness. You heard Charlie talking about it, and I would guess if we could have talked to Jake, he would have said a lot of the same things, right? Jake Fromm's a tough guy. I don't think the heat bothered Jake Fromm. I do think it probably bothered some other people. So those are kind of my opening thoughts on Jake Fromm, his role with the team, the importance of Jake Fromm, the leadership, and what's really happening. What I think is really happening right now is I don't want to say that the stuff's hitting the fan over there, but there comes a point in camp when the seniors and the upperclassmen get the attention of the young players and make it very clear to them that, look, there's a time element for us. It's my senior season, or I may not be here next year. We got to get it done now. They're going to demand the same sense of urgency from those younger players that they're putting forth themselves. That's the push coming to the shove. That's making the young players realize it ain't just about whether you're going to get the number you wanted or whether you're going to go on the field. There's a team element going on right now, and we're all in on this, right? I think that's what's happening. This happens every year. It happens on every team. And the leaders have to assert themselves. They've got to get the buy-in. The most important thing is that this team is bought into Kirby Smart. Number one, understand that. Everybody's bought into Kirby Smart in that locker room. Everyone. There's no second guessing the head coach. So that's number one, to give yourself a chance to win a championship. Everybody's got to be bought into the head coach. Everybody's bought into Kirby. Now these guys got to buy into each other. Now these guys need to hold one another accountable and need to play for their teammates. It sounds so cliche, but it's so real. You saw it last year, right? When all we heard in the preseason was how South Carolina was going to beat Georgia, how South Carolina was going to be the surprise team, right? Those Georgia guys banded together, and they went in there. They put it on South Carolina. I mean, let me tell you, they made South Carolina look bad. South Carolina wasn't a bad football team, but Georgia made South Carolina look bad. they asserted themselves on South Carolina. They exerted their will on South Carolina. And then I think Georgia got rolling, might have got a little too comfortable with themselves. Didn't change things up, wasn't broke, why fix it? And LSU was laying in wait with a good game plan. And then Georgia didn't do a very good job adjusting. I don't think Jim Chaney did a very good job adjusting on offense. And as we talked about at the start of the show, the defensive line wasn't up to snuff, and LSU was able to convert 4 4th-and-1 situations. Now, what about this year's team? Where's the work left to be done? Well, let's get back to those receivers again, because while George Pickens made a great catch, I'm not sure about his route running. I'm not sure about his downfield blocking, and I'm not sure if he knows all the audibles, and I'm not sure how far his nose is in his playbook. Now, to be fair to George, he was not an early enrollee. He's only had 9 practices. And this catch in practice number 8 that you're looking at right now, I mean, this is unreal. This is NFL, ESPN, top 10 play of the day. All that said, it's up to George and Jake to make sure that that translates to Saturdays. I've seen a lot of great receivers come and go that have made catches like that never played it down in the NFL, because there's so many other things that go along with it, right? The accountability, the responsibility, the classroom, being on time at practice, knowing the routes, knowing the playbook, knowing the audibles. Look, you're seeing the talent. It's teasing us. It's tantalizing. You say, oh my gosh, if this guy can learn and be on the field and know all his responsibilities and block like Kirby wants, then oh my gosh, right? But remember, Demetrius Robertson came in last year with a lot of skill too. But at Georgia, you've got to be the complete football player. It's going to be up to Kirby Smart and Jake Fromm to make sure that George Pickens is the complete player, just as they've done with Demetrius Robertson. You know, you see D-Rob now and how different he looks now than he did a year ago. When he came in, he wasn't physically ready. And to be fair, he hadn't gone through a spring. And remember, he'd gotten injured out there at Cal. You know, I think he only played 2 or 3 games as a sophomore. He got the immediate eligibility, but he didn't go through spring, and he came in late. And he came in behind 3 NFL receivers, probably 4 after this year. I would say J.J. Holloman, now that he's at Florida International, I do think he'll be drafted and play in the league. D-Rob came in behind 4 NFL receivers, and he was fighting for snaps. And he wasn't able to do all the things that Kirby needed him to do. He wasn't able to block sufficiently downfield. I don't think he necessarily caught on to the playbook in practice 1 or practice 2, right? There were a lot of different elements that Kirby Smart demands from that receiver position. I think D-Rob's there now. I also think Karis Jackson's close. I also think Dominic Blaylock is going to keep pushing. I think there's a lot of competition in that slot. I think Tyler Simmons is ready to make an impact. I think you could see Matt Landers make an impact. But in these 2 freshman receivers, and George Pickens and Dominic Blaylock, who you're looking at right now, you know, these are 2 highly recruited, highly ranked guys who have a chance to make a difference in the Georgia pass game, provided they do everything that they're supposed to do in the locker room, in the classroom, and in the meeting room with Jake Fromm. It keeps coming back to Jake Fromm, right? It's a lot to put on a quarterback's shoulders. But Jake's a 3rd-year starter, and it's up to him to take these young guys under his wing. I think he's done everything he can do to this point. I really do. I think some of it now is on the young guys to respond and to get the buy-in. Because if that happens for Georgia, if that last element of the offense clicks, quarterback-receiver chemistry, then I don't think Georgia can be stopped. The running game is unbelievable. You've seen it. You've seen the Great Wall. You know, people say, well, why do you call him, you know, it's not me. George Foster, first-round draft pick, 2003, he's the one that called him the Great Wall. I was out at a golf tournament in July. I said, what do you think, George? He said, they look like a great wall. They kind of do. Whether it's Andrew Thomas at left tackle or Solomon Kinley at left guard, Trey Hill at center, Big Ben Cleveland at right guard, Isaiah over there at right tackle. Then you got Cade Mays. He can play any of the positions. I mean, Jamari Salyer, the number 1 guard in the 2018 class, he's fighting just to get on the field. He's a number 7 guy. This is the best offensive line I've ever seen. And you got a 3rd-year starting quarterback behind him. Then you got DeAndre Swift. Oh, and we haven't even talked about Zamir White. You know, Georgia put out a highlight video the other day of Zamir White. And listen, I'm among the most skeptical. I've covered a lot of great running backs in my career. It's really great running backs, whether it was Sean Alexander at Alabama or Jamal Lewis, Travis Henry, Arian Foster, Le'Veon Bell when I was at Michigan State. Alvin Kamara. I've seen some backs that have done some great things. Obviously, everybody saw what Chubb and Michelle's done. Georgia's got an incredible lineage. RBU, when you look at all the great backs, starts with Herschel Walker, the greatest college football player ever. So when you start talking about great and running back, I I need to see it. Not so fast. High school footage is one thing. I need to see it. Zamir White in this one-on-one hitting drill, they'd line him up across from Channing Tindall. Let me take a look at Tindall's stats here. How big is Channing Tindall? I know this. Channing Tindall will knock your block off. Saw that on special teams. 6'2", 218 Channing Tindall lines up across from Zamir. And Zamir lowers the shoulder, and Channing goes sideways. And Zamir barely breaks stride. That's a 218-pound middle linebacker that Zamir White ran over in his first scrimmage back. So the questions that I had, whether or not Zamir would be there psychologically. Because you talk to a lot of guys that have had knee injuries, and they'll tell you that it takes 1 year to get back physically and another year to get back mentally. Zamir White answered that question for me with that hit, with planning, with the explosivity. I don't have any doubt now, and neither does Kirby Smart. I want to read you what Kirby's quote was. He got asked 3 times about Zamir White. I think that's going to end now. I think, Zamir, we're past the pity party, poster child, injured guy comeback story. I think we're looking at a guy now that Kirby's looking to get on the field. Here's what he said as far as everyone rooting for Zamir. He said, that's human nature. When you see a guy going through what he's been through, who isn't pulling for Zamir White? Every guy on our staff and every player on our team has seen his ups and downs in the rehab he's done. He's been on the sideline for a whole year just working out and running. When he gets out there to gain some confidence and have success, I think everyone's pulling for him. But here's the money quote from Kirby. I think for defensive players, it's hard to pull for him because you have to tackle him. It's not easy to tackle him. He's a grown man. In other words, welcome back, Zamir, and now the defense is like, oh, heck, we got to deal with this guy because he is a load. He is a physical back. So what does this mean? What happens now? Well, I don't think he's going to take carries away from DeAndre Swift. I think Swift is still going to get his work in. I think a lot of this offense is built around DeAndre, getting him the ball in space. He's a dynamic player. He's a home run hitter. He can score from anywhere on the field. But I think this amps up the competition for Brian Herrien. I looked at Brian Herrien. I thought Brian Herrien had a fantastic end to last season. I thought he was one of the only guys that looked like he really wanted to play in the Sugar Bowl. And then Brian had an unbelievable spring. I still can remember Brian running over J.R. Reed with that stiff arm on that video. J.R. Reed's an NFL safety, folks, and Herrien put him down. So 35 wants the ball, and he's hungry. But now number 3's in the mix. And it's going to be interesting to see how those two guys split the carries between the tackles, goal line, short yardage. Last year, Brian Herrien was the best Georgia running back statistically in short yardage. Might surprise you. You might have thought it was Swift or Holyfield. It wasn't. It was Brian Herrien. He had the best numbers in third and fourth goal line situations. He did the best converting. I think Brian is a skilled runner. I think he's put his time in. I think he's due. But Zamir White's hungry too. And that's going to be interesting to see how Kirby dices those carries up amongst those two in those situations. Now, I'm not convinced you're going to see a Zamir White 20-carry game in September or October. And as long as DeAndre Swift's healthy, I'm not sure you'll see one all year. Remember, DeAndre Swift's never carried more than, I want to say, 17 or 18 times in a game to this point in his career. So you're certainly not going to see that come out with Zamir White this early. But as far as taking the breaks and taking the restrictor plate off of Zamir White, I think Kirby's throwing him out there. So when Kirby was critical of Zamir White to the extent that he talked about how he still needed to block, how he still needed to take care of the ball in terms of ball security, that's music to the ears of Zamir White and Zamir White fans, because that means the head coach now, it's not all about pumping you up. It's not all about pushing you. It's about, okay, let's get real. This is what Zamir's got to do to get on the field. Now that we know he can run over people, I need to see the pass protection and I need to see the ball security. Now you get into that hypercritical element. When the head coach is hypercritical of you, that's not a bad thing. Ask Richard LeCounte. Think about how critical Kirby Smart has been of Richard LeCounte. That's his guy. Make no mistake about it. You know, what did LeCounte call himself? Rat Trap Richard, that's what Kirby likes to call him. That's his pet name for him. Richard LeCounte is a very special guy to Kirby Smart, okay? We know this. This is like Kirby's first guy. and Kirby coaches the safeties. So he takes Richard LeCounte personal, and he's hypercritical of him, and that tells you how much Kirby loves Richard LeCounte. I would say the same thing about Zamir White now. You're going to hear Kirby get hypercritical of Zamir White, how he blocks, knowing his pass protections, running his routes. Okay, that's a good thing when the coach gets hypercritical of you, especially because we know what Zamir can do. I saw it with my own two eyes. I'm a believer. You can't fake that. Channing Tindall is a real deal, okay? He's not some weak walk-on guy. He's a big-time linebacker, and Zamir barely broke stride. I don't know if you saw that in the story. It was kind of interesting. I posted a story, and I said Zamir White leads highlights because I saw that highlight, and I'm just like, oh, my gosh. I went back and watched it again. They had an overhead of it. You see number 3 and 41, and the caroms off of them, and I'm going back and forth. I'm going, this is a headline. There was about 12 people that are like, I didn't see a Zamir White headline in there. And I'm going, he wears the number 3. How do you miss this? Not real sure, I guess, because he didn't have his name on his jersey. But if you haven't seen that hit, and then someone said, well, he didn't run over him. Well, yeah, he did. I mean, no, did he run him like flat on his back? No, technically he's not a vehicle, and there's not tire marks on Channing Tindall. But these players hit head-to-head, and one went sideways and fell down, and the other one kept his balance and went in the end zone like he was hit by a 125-pound junior high player. I mean, that's what Zamir did. That's running over him in my book, folks. And I'm excited about Zamir White. I'm still excited about James Cook. He was a guy that I jumped on early last year because in the open scrimmage that I saw last year, we didn't have one this year, but in the open scrimmage I saw last year, Cook had some juice. He had some electricity like nobody else on the field. Remember, DeAndre Swift was still holding back at the beginning of last year. He would later tell us that because he didn't. I remember telling Chip Tower, I said, you guys talk a lot about DeAndre Swift. Well, look at the highlights last year. And I looked at the highlights last year, and they weren't the same as this year. And DeAndre later admitted, yeah, at the beginning of the year, I was holding back a little bit. He was coming off double groin surgery. We didn't know that, but he was coming off double groin. So he wasn't 7 until last November. Now, last November, DeAndre Swift decided to play. And all you got to do is ask Florida, Kentucky, or Auburn because he ran all over them. The numbers were unbelievable. I think he was averaging 9 yards a carry in those 3 games, and Georgia was playing as good as anybody in the country. But at the beginning of the year, 7 wasn't doing that, okay? Now, James Cook was. Now, why couldn't Cook get on the field at the beginning of last year? Well, because Holyfield was out there, and Holyfield was out working everybody. He's still out working people. You can find video of him in Charlotte. He's finding some practice fields 2 hours after practice. He's got trainers throwing to him, I think. But that's why Cook couldn't get on the field last year. But now Cook's being treated a little different. Kirby's talked about how Cook has matured, okay? That's code speak for I'm going to play him this year. James Cook is going to do some unbelievable things. He's not the same kind of back as Zeus or Brian Herrien. Okay, Cook is another one of those guys you want to get in space. You throw him the ball, you give him the pitch. I don't want to say that he's the number 2 to Swift, but I do think he does a lot of the same things. But I also think it's possible you'll see him on the field with Swift at the same time. I'm not so sure we won't see him line up in the slot. I think he's a guy you can line up in a shotgun with 2 backs. Maybe Cook or Swift goes in motion. However Kirby and James Coley does it, it's going to create a lot of problems for defenses when you try and match up with these guys, particularly if these receivers can learn the playbook and learn the audibles, where if Jake can go to the line of scrimmage, see the defensive lineman, call the audible, whatever it is, and everybody's on the same page. Because that's the value Jake brings. If your receivers can get up to speed, that's the value Jake brings, is his ability to read defenses and change plays at the line of scrimmage. Coley didn't call the right play. That's okay. Jake can take over at the line. Jake can help you with protections. Jake can call the right plays, and the weapons are there. And it's going to be hard to match up. So, what went wrong Saturday? Well, Charlie says it's the heat, but I've got another theory on this too. And Kirby kind of hinted at it a little bit when I asked him about the offensive line and the standard. I said, did the offensive line play up to the standard? Because I'm thinking to myself, how does the first team offense struggle with that offensive line? Something's not adding up here. And here's what Kirby said, and maybe you'll catch on to what I did here in a second. He says, that's hard to measure because we didn't run the ball every single snap like a lot of the games. Okay, bling. All right, Georgia wasn't running what they normally run, okay? Georgia knows they can run the ball, so they weren't putting their pass game in in advantageous down and distance situations. So number one, Kirby wasn't looking for the offense to set the offense up to have success. And he qualifies the statement about the offensive line by saying that. Again, hard to measure because we didn't run the ball every single snap like a lot of games. We go out there and we're a really physical team and get after it. Okay, basically saying that's who we are, folks. So the new offense ideas, they sound great, but Kirby's putting his foot down and telling you, look, we didn't run the ball like we normally do in the scrimmage, and that's who we really are. Okay, got you, Coach. Then he says, I can tell you that the standard to me is not that you're going to go out there against the 2 defense and not score on 50 or 60% of your possessions. Okay, so now he's holding the offensive line accountable for the quarterback and the receivers not having the pass game together. This is good. It gets better. You got to go convert and score. But that's not all on him, he said. That's not all on him. That's on the entire unit as a whole to execute and come out. Wide receivers catching balls, quarterbacks doing things. Not saying Jake Fromm's name there, you'll notice. The running backs breaking tackles. I don't know which running back didn't break a tackle. He must, maybe, I don't know if it was Cook or Swift. And the O-line dominating the line of scrimmage. We didn't do that today, not with the offensive line. Okay, so Kirby blames everybody. But let's be realistic. He told you right on the forefront that they didn't come out and run the ball like they're going to do this season. They are going to run the ball. They are going to dictate the run. That will always be a staple of a Kirby Smart offense. Always. Why? Because he's a defensive coordinator, and he understands how helpless it is as a D coordinator when you can't stop the run. He understands how tough it is on 2nd and 3 and on 2nd and 1 and on 3rd and 1. And when you can run the ball effectively and you put defenses in those positions where they got to load up, that's when you go over the top, right? So my theory is the offense was set up to fail. They were put in disadvantaged situations because Kirby wants to see what this offense will do when it's being tested. Why? 3 games last year Georgia fell behind in. LSU, Alabama, Texas. I don't need to tell you. They didn't come back in any of them. The passing game was not there to ring the bell when Georgia needed it. They fell behind. They didn't come back. Where was the 1-minute offense against Alabama? Where was the rally cap in the second half against Texas? LSU, for that matter, right? They need to get the passing game to the point where Kirby knows they can respond to that kind of adversity. Because, folks, Georgia's got no margin for error. And this kind of brings us all the way back to the start of the show when I talked about winning a national championship. Georgia can't afford to lose a game. Georgia can't afford to not play in the SEC championship game like Alabama did 2 years ago. That's probably not going to ever happen again. All right? I don't think Alabama deserved to be in the playoff 2 years ago. I still don't think that. Maybe they were one of the 4 best, but I don't even know what 4 best means after last year. But the point of the matter is this. Georgia's not going to get the benefit of the doubt like Alabama did. Georgia's got to win the SEC championship game to go to the playoff. Zero margin for error for Georgia Bulldogs. You know, and then here's another kicker that's kind of interesting. Clemson's going to start the year number 1. I don't know if you've looked at Clemson's schedule, but there's really not much on it that scares you. They play host to Texas A&M, I believe, on the 7th in Death Valley. That's their toughest game of the year. I don't see another game that Clemson will lose this year. Now, Syracuse has given them fits the last 2 years. Make what you want of that. Point is this. If Clemson stays number 1, Clemson's going to be the team that's going to play in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in the first-round playoff. Georgia's going to get shipped out west Tempe. Not Tempe, excuse me. They're now in Scottsdale. They've got that Phoenix University of Phoenix Stadium. So unless Clemson slips, Georgia's going to have a long road trip first round of the playoff. Again, zero margin for error for Georgia. Nobody's going to do them any favors. All right, Florida AD and the Georgia Tech AD on that playoff committee, they're not punching Georgia's ticket. I got news for you. Ain't going to happen. I want to take some questions now. I've rambled on. I've kind of vented. I've kind of shared some thoughts. I've written a lot of these things already in different ways. I've said it on different forums, but I haven't really had a chance to talk to the Dog Nation crew. And we do have an unbelievable audience on Facebook. I really enjoy it. I get a lot of feedback on that, just looking at some of the questions and some of the comments. So here we go on our Ingles on the Beat segment. I'm going to take a look and see what some of the comments are. Jesse McCall says Georgia Tech could be a sleeper in first week. Name their offensive game plan. GT could be a sleeper first week. Is that Georgia Tech, or is there somebody with the initials GT? Am I missing something? We got somebody with the initials GT? Because Georgia Tech's not a sleeper. Georgia Tech they're asleep. That program's dead. They're not. I mean, I don't know why that name's even coming up on the show. Georgia Tech? Give me 3 years. Give them 3 years. I don't even know what the point of Georgia. Anyway, they do have a great engineering school and a cool campus. Any insight into injuries beyond what we hear from? Bruce. Okay, so Nate McBride is out. I know he's a fan favorite, but he's not in the too deep. So the fact that he's out doesn't really hurt the team badly right now. I do think Nate is a guy that's still working. I do think Nate's a guy that could still emerge, but he's just not there yet. I do think he's invaluable on special teams, and don't downplay that, because Georgia's special teams last year had plenty to be desired. They've got to get better there. That's one area they got to get better. Yes, Blankenship. Can't miss a 30-yard field goal, okay? That cost Georgia that game, in my opinion. Momentum swung. They had other opportunities to win, but if Blankenship hits 30-yard field goal in the third quarter, Alabama ain't coming back from 17 down, in my opinion. Fake punt should have been executed. It was there. Guy froze up. He's at Ohio State now. Next guy that gets in can't freeze up. Georgia's got to get better on special teams. Nate McBride does matter. Coverage matters. Other player injuries, I thought Eli Wolfe injury was very important. Okay, Eli Wolfe. Now, Charlie Warner is a guy. Understand this. Charlie's a big physical tight end. Charlie's a guy that can catch the ball adequately. Charlie's a guy that can run with the ball adequately after the catch, and he can block really well. He's got an NFL future. He's on the Senior Bowl radar. I talk to their scout all the time, and I do that because I want to hear what the NFL is saying about these guys, because the league knows, because they go to practice, they talk to other NFL scouts, and they talk to the Georgia coaches. So if you're on Senior Bowl radar, you're doing something right, because the NFL don't play. They don't play favorites. They don't like a guy because of where he's from or what his haircut looks like. They're about business. You know that. Good, bad, or indifferent. If you can play, they're drafting you. They're interested in Charlie Warner. But I don't think Charlie Warner fills the shoes of Isaac Nauta. Georgia likes to run two tight ends, and one of those tight ends is kind of a matchup guy, okay, where he's got to block just good enough, right? Nauta was that guy. Nauta was really good downfield catching the ball. Nauta had speed. Nauta had hands. Charlie's adequate. Don't take this wrong, but Charlie can do both, and you need a versatile guy on that side of the line at tight end. Eli Wolfe's 238. He runs a 4.55 40. He's the fastest and strongest tight end on the team. He tested out that way. He's hungry too now. He was a team captain at Tennessee. He didn't leave Tennessee to come here and sit the bench. And Georgia didn't get him to come here and sit the bench. Keep an eye on Eli Wolfe. I think he's a guy that's going to do some things downfield this year. And with that 4.55 40, I think he's going to create some matchup problems. He's also got very good hands, and James Coley has publicly said that. Charlie's a guy who will get more catches than he's gotten in the past, but they need Charlie to do other things that I don't think other tight ends on this team are ready to do. I don't think Fitzpatrick's there yet. I don't know if you saw the 2-on-2, speaking of highlights Georgia put out, and this should have got a lot more attention. I'm probably guilty. I should have played it up more, but I got caught up in George Pickens and Zamir White just like you all did. There was an incredible 2-on-2 where Kirby puts Tate Crowder and Monty Rice, the two starting inside linebackers, up against John Fitzpatrick and DeAndre Swift. And they're at about the 2-yard line. And Fitzpatrick tries to block Monty Rice. Monty's not having anything to do with it. He blows through Fitzpatrick's block. Tay is able to grab DeAndre and turn him sideways. He can't knock him back. He can't go low, and he wouldn't have tackled him by himself. But he was able to hold him up and turn him sideways just long enough for Monty to go over there and clean it up. Now I didn't have the pylon camera. I don't know if Swift got in, but Swift's celebrating and the linebackers are celebrating. Everybody's celebrating except for John Fitzpatrick. Okay. Monty Rice and Tate Crowder, these guys are real, okay? Neither one of them are first team, second team, third team. You got to believe Kirby Smart saw those all-SEC teams and sat back and laughed out loud and said, oh, this is great. I can't wait. Somebody get this down on the bulletin board. Somebody please blow this up and let my defense see that J.R. Reed is the only guy first-team defense. Can somebody please do that? That's what Kirby Smart did, right? Or somebody did it for him. Somebody said, oh, man, Kirby, get it up. You know Coach Smart's going to get – listen, Monty Rice, Tate Crowder, these guys are some bad dudes, man. Some bad dudes. But getting back to the injury thing. So Eli Wolfe was healthy yesterday. He's looking good. Tyson Campbell was back out there. That's important. That depth at corner is very important. There's some great competition there. Tyreke Stephenson out there competing, although Charlton Warren called him out. Called him out. Charlton Warren puts up with no slack, okay? Charlton was known as, quote-unquote, Mr. Intensity at Air Force when he was playing football for the Falcons because of his work ethic. And he still coaches this way. I remember when Charlton was a candidate for this Georgia job. I mean, Charlton was a guy that everybody wanted. And he's been a few different places, right? He was at Nebraska, then he was at North Carolina, and then Tennessee hired him, and then Florida hired him, and then Kirby grabbed him this year. This was Kirby's guy for a reason, because of the discipline, the intensity. And we're just talking about drills. Like, you know, we're out there, and they got the one-on-ones and the receivers blocking the corner, and they put like a pad behind the cornerback who's lined up in like tight press coverage, and the whole point of the drill is to teach the corner to step to the side before you start your back pedal. So they've got that pad right behind their feet so they can't step back. They've got to step to the side when they redirect. Well, Tyreke didn't give a good enough look. I think he was going up against Amir speed, and he didn't give a strong enough release as a receiver. And Charlton said, hey, you're not making that guy better. Every rep, guys. Every rep counts. This, when Kirby Smart talks about do more, that's what he's talking about. He's saying don't waste one rep. Don't waste that opportunity to make your teammate better. Even though you're not the guy that the drill's set up for on this particular play, it'll be next time it's going to be speed coming off and you're the defender. When you're that guy on offense, that pretend receiver, you need to give him a good look. That's how high the bar has been raised at Georgia right now. That's where the intensity level is at. There's zero slack. I will say this, for all the programs I've covered, I've never seen a program that's this intense, that's this focused on every single snap. And if they're not, those coaches are right up their tails. Right there. They're barking, they're yelling, they're calling them out. Kirby's on the loudspeaker. I mean, there's just no wasted time. And it doesn't matter how hot it is. Kirby not moving that practice tonight, and he ain't moving it to the morning. He's going to tell those guys to hydrate and be ready. Now, he might move them inside for a little bit in the shade. He's certainly not going to endanger his players. They watch these guys so closely, so carefully over there, but they are so well conditioned. It's impressive. I'll take a look at some questions here. What do we got? How much better is Fromm going to be knowing there's a chance Fields isn't coming in? Preston Piper, it's a good question. Here's my answer. Jake Fromm is going to be better than he looks. And here's what I mean by that. Jake Fromm doesn't have 3 NFL receivers right now to throw to. Now, eventually, George Pickens and Dominic Blaylock. But if you're asking me, is this year's receiving core as good as last year's? The answer is no. Let's not kid ourselves. Let's not play games. Let's not pretend. Let's not talk ourselves into it. All right? Riley Ridley and Mecole Hardman and Terry Godwin had a lot of experience last year, and so did J.J. Holloman. Those guys were all great receivers. Now, that said, George Pickens might have a higher ceiling than all of them. He might have Randy Moss talent. I don't know. But he's got to learn the playbook. And he's got to learn to do all those other things that those guys, he's got to be able to check the boxes that those receivers could all check last year. George isn't there yet. Blaylock's not there yet. I think Demetrius Robertson's closing in on it, but I'm not ready to say that D-Rob equals Mecole Hardman yet, okay? And I'm not ready to say that anybody equals Riley Ridley yet. Now, Lawrence Cager's come in. He's a senior grad transfer from Miami. I went down there. You saw the stories I did. I flew down there. I went to his apartment. I walked around campus with him. He's a great guy. He's a pro. He's a big-time person, okay? And Cager is focused, and he's going to give you everything he's got. I'm not ready to say, though, that he's going to fill J.J. Holloman's shoes. I think J.J. was a heck of a ball player. So you ask me how good is Jake Fromm, I would tell you. And there we are here. I want to tell you something about this video here. You look at Cager. He looks irritated. I want to tell you why. What you don't see here is that there's about 30 Miami parents and students standing around, and they all want to get their picture taken in front of the U. It's a graduation day. Now, Lawrence and I waited for 25 minutes to do this shoot in front of the U. You can see that this is a very iconic spot on campus. It's an unbelievable campus, by the way. The whole thing looks like a botanical garden or something. It's beautiful. But we wait our turn to talk. Maybe they don't realize that Lawrence has just given 4 years of his life to Miami to play football and came back from a knee. Maybe they don't understand that Lawrence has done more as a college football player than any of their daughters or sons that are standing around wearing the cape and gown, because they're giving Lawrence and I dirty looks like we're taking up their valuable time. Because we get done, and I say to Cager, I'm like, man, those people, he's like, man, you can see why part of me is ready to get out of here. This was a great place to go to school. I loved it. I'm proud of the education, but I'm ready to be at Georgia. And that's how Lawrence felt, because and that's what was happening in that picture. But to answer your question, again, going back to what I said earlier, Jake's only going to be as good as receivers, okay? So these receivers have got to come along. And Jake is going to make these guys look better than the next guy will. Because whoever the next guy is, next year, he's not going to be as good as Jake Fromm. Maybe in 2 years, maybe there's some wonder recruit out. We know they've got a great recruit out of Jacksonville. Maybe 1 year in the system. But next year, Georgia quarterback play won't be as good. This year, it's going to be, unless Jake comes back, of course, So that to answer your question, Jake will only be as good as those receivers let him be. He's amazing. He's on top of everything. Kirby loves him. Jay Squillet says, in 2017, J.R. Reed was the surprise guy. In 2018, it was Erik Stokes. Absolutely. Who's your prediction on who that guy could be by the end of the season? We're talking about the secondary here, Jay. Man, I like Tyreke the Freak. I like Tyreke Stephenson. I do. I like number 7. It's going to sound crazy when I went and covered Camp Sunshine, and they're playing dodgeball. I know it's a different game. But Tyreek's was so fast and so quick and so competitive. And then they did their little impromptu dunk contest. I don't know if you saw the video of that. And Tyreke is soaring. And I'm saying, oh, my gosh. And then we asked Dan Lanning about him. And what was Dan Manning's quote? Holy moly, we got us a ball player after just watching him. Now, Tyreke, like those other young players, has to learn the playbook. As Kirby would say, has to get the eye discipline. In other words, don't get fooled. Play your assignment. Don't farm somebody else's land, as Kirby said about Richard LeCount. Rat Trap Richard, as Kirby calls him. But I like Tyreke. I think he's a guy that's going to make plays. I don't necessarily think that he's going to start, but I think he's going to play early. And I think we're going to see a lot of games where we're going to see teams playing multi-receiver sets on Georgia. And I think you're going to see number 7 out there, Tyreke Stephenson. I expect him to emerge. I also like Marc Webb a lot. And I know that Webb isn't a sexy name. He's kind of been kicking around for a while and hasn't really done anything big yet. But I had a chance I ran into Webb this summer. Just had a few minutes. Nothing on the record, no illegal interviews. But I was very impressed talking with Marc about how hard he said that they were working and his focus. And also, by the way, his manners and his professionalism. Let me tell you, these Georgia football players, they're a classy group, folks. They really are. I know there's been some off-the-field issues and there's been some trouble. But I can tell you, when we go to interview those players, or when I've run into these guys in public settings, they're very polite and they're very professional. There was nothing that made Marc Webb say yes, sir, and no, sir to me. I don't hold any authority on him. I was probably wearing a ball cap and T-shirt when I ran into him. But that's just how pleasant and how respectful of a person Marc is. And I'm impressed with him. I want to see good things happen for him. He's worked hard to get in this position where he's going to have an opportunity to be that nickel, that star. I think he's invested, and I think he's a leader. And I think that's one of the reasons why Kirby Smart sent him out to talk to us. So that's a guy to root for right there, number 23, Marc Webb. He's put his time in the program, and let's hope that he's able to capitalize this year. Gary and Christian Galano says, I'll take untapped freshman talent like Blaylock rather than experience that has a lesser ceiling like JJ any day of the week. Blessing in disguise. Gary, maybe you know something I don't, but I was impressed with J.J. Holloman. His domestic issue aside, I hadn't seen anything to indicate that he wasn't a focused football player. I guess I'll leave it at that. And I hope Dominic Blaylock does live up to the 5 stars or the 4 stars. I know that there's a lot of anticipation, and he's off to a very good start. But J.J. Holloman was probably headed for an All-SEC season and a draft status in the top 3 rounds. So we'll see. I know that ultimately you like that untapped potential, but as of what's good right now, I want the guy that knows the playbook right now, the proven guy. Hopefully Blaylock, by November, when Georgia hits that stretch of the schedule, really October, hopefully Dominic will be making a contribution. But right now he's still running 3rd string behind Demetrius Robertson and Kyrus Jackson, and we'll have to see what happens. Ethan Bradburn says screenplays to James Cook and Zeus and Swift. I think more Cook and Swift. I'm not saying Zamir can't catch the ball, but when you got a guy with the power that Zamir possesses, I think you want to use him between the tackles. And to me, that's an area where, I think Swift is good, but not great between the tackles. Same thing with James Cook, 215, 210-pound guys. Zamir, he looks bigger than that to me. He certainly runs bigger, and he brings the hat. So, maybe we'll see him catch the ball a little bit. He certainly has the hands to, and he'll probably evolve into that guy. But as a freshman, you want to create a role where he can be out there every week. How's Adam Anderson doing? Alton wants to know. I saw Adam getting some first-turn reps yesterday. Remember this about the outside linebacker position, and Kirby talked about this the other day. Outside linebacker, when we think about Georgia, we think about their 3-4 defense, and we say, well, 3-4, 2 inside linebackers, 2 outside linebackers. Well, because of the way offenses are lining up with 3 and 4 receivers, Georgia lines up more in a 3-3-5. So really, as Kirby explained to us last week, you really only have one outside linebacker out there at a time. So who's it going to be? Is it going to be Azeez Elijahari? Is it going to be Nolan Smith? Is it going to be Jermaine Johnson? Or is it going to be Adam Anderson? So you kind of have different guys with different skill sets that Kirby's going to plug in or that Dan Lanning's going to plug in. Now, Kirby says, I'll just take one that does it all. I'll just take another Roquan Smith. I bet everybody wishes they could have another Roquan Smith. Well, you can't, Coach. There's only one, and you only get one of those once every 5 or 6 years. Although, as much talent as Georgia's got in the linebacking core right now, I better stop short. They may have the next Roquan. Why is nobody talking about Robert Beal? They are. You asked that question. Lanning mentioned Robert Beal. Robert's still very much in the mix. Robert's worked very hard. I think he's worked himself out of the doghouse. I think he's going to get snaps. I think he's going to be very important. Again, very deep at outside linebacker. So where those guys make an impact is special teams. And don't turn your nose up at it, because I pointed out special teams play, I believe, cost Georgia the SEC championship game last year. Trez Marshall looking good in practice. He is, Alex. He took Kenny McIntosh off his feet. Kenny Mac, talented kid from South Florida, brings it at 215. I don't know that Kenny'd been hit like that. I think Kenny thought he was going to be able to reset his feet. I think that was a little bit of a wake-up call, and it said a lot about Trez. Otis Reese and Lewis Sine, they're buried a little bit at safety. I think Kirby really likes having Richard LeCount and JR out there because of their experience and their ability to communicate. One of the reasons why Georgia's going after more havoc this year and more multiple fronts and a more complex defense is because Kirby has more trust in the back seven. Okay, because JR and Richard have played a season together, because Monty has snaps under his belt, because Tay is more experienced. That's going to enable more communication, the type of communication that you need to run multiple fronts and blitzes and disguise coverages. So I still think you're going to see Otis out there, and Lewis. Lewis is a tremendous athlete. The guy has got unbelievable hops. When they're in a Hail Mary situation, you certainly will see him out there. Does Tyson Campbell look better? He looks bigger. He looks stronger. Remember, in all fairness to Tyson, in that Missouri game last year, he suffered a shoulder separation. A subluxation is what it's called, but essentially your shoulder pops out of joint. He got nauseated, threw up. That's a game Stokes came in, played really well. I don't think Tyson was himself the rest of the year as far as being able to bring the shoulder. I think he's back now. He looks bigger and more physical. I think he's having a good camp. You feel good about there. Let's take a look here. Tyson Campbell is going to have to earn that starting spot again. Gary, you're right. He's getting pressed by Tyreke Stephenson. No doubt about it. You've heard that Lewis is getting a lot of one-on-one with Kirby, John. I wouldn't be surprised. When I've been out there, Kirby's all over all those safeties. That's one of the great things about having a 43-year-old head coach is his energy level is unbelievable. I've stood out there before and I said, I don't know how Kirby does it. My producer, Michael Carvel, he's got a couple kids. You run around chasing these kids around for 30 minutes. You go, my gosh, I'm exhausted. Kirby's out there in 105-degree heat for 3 hours yelling at the top of his lungs. And you say, where does this come from? I'll tell you where it comes from. Kirby is a competitive guy. We got a story up right now. You talk about intensity. I mean, he's a little obsessive with this in a healthy kind of way. But all these great coaches that make it to the top, the Sabans, the Kirbys, the Urban Meyers, I know you hate them, but there's a reason these guys win. They're relentless. They're relentless competitors. Don't tell Kirby it's 105 degrees out there. He's not even thinking about it. He's focused on that safety, how he can make Lewis Sign better, or what he can get on Richard LeCount for, how he's going to coach him up to be the best safety in America. Joshua Campbell, is Jake Camarda more effective this year on punting? Joshua, I don't know, but I do know this. At Camp Sunshine, when Jake Camarda got in the slam dunk line, his teammates started laughing, and when he started to jump, one of them said, "No way," and Jake Camarda dunked the ball. Jake Camarda can dunk. So, I don't know how he's punting, but he's a lot better athlete than a lot of people think. Punters and kickers are athletes too. Just want to get that point in there. This time of year is Mike's wheelhouse. Philip, I think every time of year is my wheelhouse. Is there a time of year it's not my wheelhouse? I'll tell you when it's not my wheelhouse, when there's no football to talk about. That last week in June, the last 2 weeks of June weren't my wheelhouse. I'm going to tell you what, you got me started now. You got me upset because I changed my vacation because I thought Georgia was going to the Baseball World Series. You just brought up a very sore topic with me. That Georgia baseball team was something else. I was there for that 21-inning game against Clemson. I was all in, man. I'm telling you, I'm impressed with Scott Strickland and Georgia baseball. Excuse the tangent here, but that's not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is not June because there's no football. So, Philip, that's the answer. That's my comment. I appreciate the comment, though, and I always appreciate your comments. I know you're a bit of a comedian in here. I always get a kick out of some of your, even at my expense, I might add. They are kind of funny here. Joshua Campbell says, wow, Joshua, I don't know what you're whining about. Marion wants to know about David Marshall injury. So in the offseason, David had Liz Frank foot surgery. It's midfoot, okay? He's been back, but just like Julian Rochester, defensive tackle, Kirby's kind of limited their snaps. You look at them out there, their jerseys are like white. Everybody else's are like yellow and brown. That kind of tells you something. Kirby hasn't said it, but they've been limited this fall. Now, limited to the point that they think that they're going to be ready to play in the opener, but still limited. David came off the field yesterday. I have to be careful how I say this. There are rules about going to Georgia practice. I didn't see David Marshall limping yesterday. I did see David Marshall walk off the field. I will leave it at that. I wouldn't be surprised if David Marshall's back today. So I don't want to give away any secrets or break any of the Georgia rules. Georgia has a great sports information staff, and I try to adhere to all their rules because truly they're the most cooperative group of people I've ever dealt with anywhere. Camarda, athleticism does not matter. James Crump, yes, it does. He might just run 30 yards for a fake punt. You never know. Can he place the ball inside the 5-yard line without Melt Cole help? Now, that is a great observation by James. As important as it is for the punter to be able to put it there, you better have guys that can get downfield and down it. And we've seen it where you'll see, all you got to do is touch the ball, and the guy goes sliding into the end zone. You say, my gosh, how hard can it be? But Cole Hardman was outstanding at that. So that's a really good observation there. I'll be interested to see who takes over that role. He's one of those gunners, flyers out there. Jeff wants to know about Notori on the D-line. I haven't seen a lot of scrimmages. I overheard Notori in a hallway the other day say, man, I missed 2 sacks. So I guess that's kind of a good news, bad thing. Good news, bad news kind of thing. If Notori is feeling like he's getting close to making sacks, that's good. It's bad that he didn't finish it, but he is in the mix. The transfers, Josh Campbell wants to know, Cager and Wolfe, they're both doing really well. Cager right now is kind of 1A, 1B with Matt Landers. Don't know who's going to start on the outside over there. Maybe, who knows, maybe picking slides out there and instead of lining up behind Tyler Simmons. Not sure how that's going to work. But they're doing really well. And as I spoke earlier in the show, I think Wolf's doing really well. Got a little dinged up, but he's back out there now. He's impressed. James Coley has said good things. Will Cook be the return man or D-Rob Alton? I don't know. Still too early for that. We still kind of figure out who's going to be on the bus. I guess you can only bring 70 there to Vanderbilt, so that's going to be interesting. They're going to have to make some decisions early on about who plays and who's going to be on the bus, so to speak. So I want to wrap it up here down. We've gone about almost an hour. I've enjoyed doing the show live in studio. It's always a lot of fun, and I appreciate your comments, your questions. If you have any more final comments or questions, shoot them to me. I'll be glad to get them out there before I head back to Athens for practice this afternoon. Let's take a look here. Will the defense be top 5 this year? No, but they will create a lot of havoc. They won't be because when you take chances, you give up big plays. The objective is not to be in the top 5. The objective is to win football games. I know I sound like a coach right now, but when you run a more aggressive scheme, you're going to give up more big plays, and your third down conversion defense probably won't be as good, but you'll also have more sacks, more receptions, more fumbles. So top 5 in scoring defense, top 5 in rushing defense, top 5 in passing defense, probably not. But if they're undefeated, nobody's going to care, and I think you're going to see Georgia take a giant leap in sacks and turnovers forced. D-Rob returning kicks. He is a rocket. I agree with you, James. Absolutely. Folks, I can't thank you enough. I appreciate the engagement. I appreciate the comments. If you've got more questions, go ahead and leave them there. Follow me on Twitter, please, at MikeGriffith32. Those Twitter follows help. I like to put my links up to my stories or retweet from Dog Nation. Could Zeus turn pro after 2 years? Don't know, Joel. We got to wait and see. Got to see how his role unwinds. But again, I'm going to close it up from here now. If you got questions, drop them. Email me at MikeGriffith032@gmail.com. You can find me in the Dog Nation forum. Hopefully, you've got your app set up. If you got to have a Dog Nation app, folks. I'm telling you, you don't want to miss out because we're breaking news 24/7. We got 5 people, and right now we're smoking it. Killing it with the coverage. And in fact, I think we're going to have 3 or 4 people at practice today, 3 or 4 more people later this week. It's been something else. So everybody have a great Tuesday. Be careful out there in this heat. Avoid the heat. Careful in the traffic as well.